Hello, everyone, and welcome to CodeCast by STL Tech Talk, where we're going to bring you the content you want and need: instructional, informative, unique, and insightful commentary on programming and technology. My name is JJ Hammond, and I'm joined tonight by two coding experts. Up first, our guest. He is an experienced software engineer specializing in development of web applications, web services, and service-oriented architecture. His particular interests lie in UI and application development, integrating different services, provide an application that truly allows users to do better work in less time and achieve goals more efficiently. The incredible David Hathaway. Hello, David, and thank you for being on the show.
Hello, guys. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you on, and I cannot wait for your demo and talk. It's going to be phenomenal. However, this show would not be possible without my fellow co-host, and I really mean that too. I usually say that about Gus because he's usually here, and we really miss him, but he's at Dev Connection, so he's having fun too, so he's not being left out. The creator, however, of STL Tech Talk app for Windows 8, the amazing Alejandro Ramirez. Welcome back to the show, Alejandro.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. Great to have David here, of course.
And go follow us. Go follow this show. Everyone listening to this show, our past guests, our future guests, whatever, go support the show by following us. You can find us on Twitter, #CodeCast, or at STL CodeCast. Yes, on the interwebs, stltechtalk.com is the main website that we have. So don't forget to visit our site so you can keep up with our tech news, podcast, CodeCast is what we're on, programming code, hands-on reviews, event coverage, and much, much more. And don't forget you can interact with the show by sending us feedback to podcast@stltechtalk.com. And a special thank you goes out tonight for our last guest, Miguel Castro. He is a phenomenal person and a software programmer, developer, engineer, and likes to give me a whole bunch of flack for messing up his intro every single time he's on the show. So thanks for being a great guy all around. Also, I want to take out the time to thank the sponsors of our show, Inertia Software, creating cutting-edge, highly scalable Microsoft technological solutions to the energy industry. Visit inertia-software.com to see how they can help you. Also, want to take a moment to thank Tech Systems. Our people make IT possible. People are at the heart of every successful business. Every year, Tech Systems deploys over 80,000 IT professionals at 6,000 client sites across North America, Europe, and Asia. With IT staffing solutions, IT management, and IT services, complement and enhance your in-house skills and capabilities, optimize how you attract, develop, and retain IT people, achieve business goals with managed project and outsourced services. Contact Tech Systems today by visiting them on the web, techsystems.com, or call them at our local office here in St. Louis, 314-819-1111, and that is 4 ones, just in case for all of you keeping track, 314-819-41s. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and kick off the show with the very first question to David. How did you get here, sir? Where are you coming from? Tell us a little bit about your history, all the above. Looking forward to it.
Absolutely. So, a little bit about myself is that, I've been doing development since I was a teenager. Came up through high school doing technical programming, went to college to be a developer, and really have just been, it's just a thing that I'm passionate about. As I've, has come up through my professional career, I've had lots of different roles, working as an IT intern, spent my time doing commercial development, always in the Microsoft technologies and the .NET stack in particular. I just found a great home with that particular technology. It's just very natural to me, very comfortable. And as a friend of ours here at the company, Scott Hanselman, once said, "It's the language that gets me everywhere that I need to be." So it's just a phenomenal way to develop. I spent about 10 years working and building ASP.NET applications, enterprise line of business type applications using .NET technologies. And then probably the last year or so at my previous company, I was actually a Xamarin customer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that's how I found out about the technology was by actually using it. We were looking at mobile app development and trying to figure out how are we going to attack it. We had an army of C# developers. We knew that we needed fully native applications. We had really data-intensive applications, and so we gave Xamarin a try. And for me, it was an overnight success. I had spent probably about a month or so before that just coming up to speed on Objective-C and on Java. And while there's nothing wrong with either of those languages individually, for me it never quite clicked. I was a C# guy. And when I got Xamarin, the first time I downloaded it, I installed it, I just looked at it and said, this is just an amazingly cool product. I had my proof of concept built in 2 days, and from there I was hooked. And so that was in about 2012. I was living back in Boston, where I was born and raised. And about 3 months, I family Cisco and in Xamarin's offices, and it's just kind of been history ever since then.
That's gorgeous. So you know what it's like to move all over the place for something that you love doing, right?
Absolutely. And I wouldn't want to do something like this for something that I didn't absolutely love. The days can be long, but
Sure.
this is this is a technology that I absolutely believe in. Fell in love with it as soon as I saw it, and really see the potential for how it's going to change how people do mobile app development. For many years to come, which is why why I'm here and doing what I'm doing.
That's awesome, man. That is awesome. So what technology grabbed you first? Let me just kind of throw it out there, because for some people it's gaming, for other people it's just what you grew up with. What's a little bit of history there?
It's always just been computing in general.
Okay.
The idea of being able to program the computer and to make it do what you need. I remember being, oh God, I'd have to guess I was maybe 6 or 7 years old, and maybe a little bit older, and getting my first Apple II. For anybody who's coded the old logo writer application, you get the little turtle, and you tell him where to go on the screen, and he draws the little line below. Yeah, Alejandro remembers that.
Yeah,
that was probably my first experience in programming, and I just always thought it was just super cool. And so as I got older, learning, Basic, QBasic, Visual Basic, but really where it clicked for me was when I really first saw the internet. Just seeing mediums where you could deliver and reach so many different people with your technology, with your application. And so when I got out of college and had the opportunity to start doing professional web development, I think that was really where I was in it for the long run.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, that's really cool. Alejandro about jumped out of his skin when you said that. He was like, "Oh, me too. That's so cool." Somebody else share interest.
I just have never met anybody who talks about logo, and I went to a summer camp when I was finishing elementary school, and that was actually pretty cool. I thought it was the greatest thing. I remember spending the whole night before the day after we found about logo and kind of writing everything on paper. Oh, I'm gonna write 10 to the right, 10 go up,
Exactly.
change this color, and draw this really cool thing. That was awesome.
That is cool.
Yeah, very much so.
So in speaking a little bit about Xamarin now, so you used the product, you were like, man, this is solid. Did you get that? It sounds like you got the bug as soon as you started using it. Like, man, this is right where it's at. What were some of the things that like brought you in? Was it like the familiar developer environment that you were used to?
It was a handful of other things. That was certainly part of it. Living in Visual Studio for the last 10 years, all different kinds of incarnations, being able to stay in that environment and just use the tools that I was already productive with made a huge difference. My first POC that we put together, I had specifically set up from the beginning it needed to be cross-platform. I needed to be able to hit iOS and Android. I don't think Windows Phone 7 had quite come out yet at that particular time.
Mm-hmm.
But these were requirements that we were setting right from the beginning, and looking at the solutions that were out there, it just looked harder than it needed to be. So for me, the idea that I could go and grab a whole bunch of C# code that I had already written for other applications and start consuming my web services, that was all code that I was having to rewrite from the ground up in Java, rewrite from the ground up in Objective-C, and literally in an afternoon I had my proof of concept built for both iOS and Android. collected user data, called out to web services, plotted the resulting data back on maps. And this was something that as a C# developer with Xamarin I was able to do literally in a matter of hours. And that's what really hooked me was how quickly and easily I could get to those platforms without having much of any knowledge about them.
Right. Right. I'm sure like you fired up those those emulators and you're like, no, all right. Yeah, let's try this. Let's see what'll happen when I do this.
Had my shiny MacBook and downloaded Xcode and got my giant Xcode 5 book and hot off the presses and figured, hey, I can figure this out. I can do it. And I'm sure if I spent enough time I could. But that's part of it is you don't necessarily want to have to spend that time learning and retooling and coming up to speed. Being able to do that with what you already know and love and are very, very productive in makes a huge difference.
Yep. So where did Xamarin get its start? Tell us a little bit of the history behind Xamarin.
Yeah, this is a super fun story. Some of the folks who are on may kind of know the history a little bit, but it goes back to Boston of all places, coincidentally,
nice.
Where I'm originally from. That's right around coincidence.
No.
Exactly. So back in it was about 2000 and 2001, our co-founders started a company called Ximian. And Ximian were the original creators of the Mono runtime. And so for those who aren't familiar, the Mono runtime is an open source implementation of the Microsoft .NET stack. So Microsoft had come out with C#. They thought, this is just a fantastic, amazing, beautiful programming language. But they were Linux guys. They wanted to be able to develop that on a the Linux environment. So they said, how hard could it possibly be? We'll just port what Microsoft has spent millions engineering and we'll create our own runtime for this.
Sure.
And so, yeah, it's easy. We'll get it done.
Knock it down a weekend over some beers. No big deal.
Yeah. In our CTO, Miguel de Icaza, a lot of folks probably know that name. One of the smartest guys I've ever met in my life. If anybody can do it, he can. But they may have underestimated it to begin with. But so they continued doing their development. They eventually sold that company to Novell. Miguel stayed with the project for a number of years, and the other co-founder, who's our CEO, Nat Friedman, he moved on, did a few other things, moved into some other spaces. And in about 2010, there was actually a really unique opportunity for Nat and Miguel to get back together and get their intellectual property back from Novell. And at that point, that it continued to develop. They had a great, robust, mature platform. It was still, it had a number of great customers, but they hadn't quite had the success I think they were looking for. And the really interesting thing was they created a solution to a problem that just quite hadn't manifested itself yet. And right at that same time, there was just almost this perfect storm of events that were happening. iOS had launched their App Store and their developer kits. Android was becoming, much more prevalent in the environment. Windows Phone was on the downswing. BlackBerry was falling out of favor because everybody wanted that great iPhone user experience. And when all those conditions happened, having a great developer platform that could reach those different environments was let's just say it was a diamond in the rough, so to speak. And and Miguel saw that coming, and he said, we need to make this work. And so that was in 2010, and that's how Xamarin was actually founded. So it was really interesting because we really inherited a base of customers who were already buying and using the product. And that just allowed us to just continue accelerating and turn the company into what it is today.
Do you think they had that holy cow moment when they were like, oh my God, we're like right where we need to be to make even more money? That would have been the champagne moment. Like, somebody give me a cigar. Somebody go get me something, because like this is awesome. We're already where we need to be. Well, those guys, they can probably tell the future anyway, so I'm not gonna. They already saw it coming anyway, so they probably partied ahead of time. So speaking of that, so where it is now, so what are some of the pain points that Xamarin actually solves right now?
So probably, the biggest thing is it keeps .NET developers productive. So first and foremost, you're going to take legions of C# developers, millions and millions of developers worldwide, who basically have been completely cut out of the mobile development trend. Mm-hmm. Those developers have, they've been on the Windows side of things. They're building desktop applications, they're building websites. But when it comes to iOS and Android, their options were hybrid, or learn Objective-C and learn Java. And those, for a lot of developers, those aren't really compelling options. So the first thing is that it takes those millions of developers and immediately empowers them to target those new platforms. And the upside of that is there's a number of different things that are benefits of that. One is, an organization, you don't have to retool your entire team. So if you've spent millions of dollars training these engineers, you can now you have a ready-made set of iOS and Android engineers that can share code with the server side and just be extremely productive. And then, beyond that, there's a lot of just technical reasons why it's just a superior approach. You're writing less code, and anybody who writes code knows the less code you write, the less code coverage on your unit testing. Just across the board, you're going to create higher quality applications. You're going to do it faster. You're going to do it with less resources, and the applications that you're producing, you're going to have less of a lag in. Well, my iOS users have this great new feature, and then it takes me 6 months to a year for my Android users to get it, and that kind of leapfrogging. Once you've built the core technology for your application, the core architecture, that's going to translate over into each of those platforms and really make a multi-channel distribution for your mobile applications a possibility. Whereas before, you might have just said, we're going to pick the most popular one, and that's the only one we're going to do right now, and really just cutting off a huge segment of your possible users.
Right.
And on top of that, just C# just being an incredibly productive language, period. All of the great things Microsoft has done to, for the asynchronous programming models, implementing generics and LINQ and just all these great programming features, just further accelerates that development. So there's just several areas where it solves pain points over the existing technologies.
Yes. So Alejandro, do you have any quick questions before I move on to my next one?
Yeah, I'm actually curious. This is kind of a question in between, but I think if we compare the native options out there, arguably, I believe I came from like Visual Basic and then did a bunch of Java work for a while. And when I tried to get into mobile, I think Objective-C has arguably a deeper or steeper learning curve than other languages like Java and C#. So how much have you seen of kind of the reverse side of things, where maybe people coming from other platforms that they're deciding to jump into C# to target multi-platform, and people who are just getting started? What's kind of the adoption rate for the non-C# programmers?
I mean, as you know, C# is a fairly trivial language to learn. If somebody has developed in a language like Objective-C or Java, C# is it's a very simple thing for them to actually pick up within a few weeks of time. Just some basic concepts of C#. You can be developing your first iOS and Android application. We've got great accelerators. Not only do we have fantastic tutorials and pre-built applications and things like that, but we also have our Xamarin University program, which is specifically designed to take developers with no mobile experience and accelerate and turn them into mobile developers. So what we really find is that C# for the people who are open-minded and willing to learn it is probably the least of their concerns. C# is very easy for developers to learn, and I guess we also have to throw a nod out there. We also recently added F# support as well. So if those devs want to come over and start functional programming, you can use F# with Xamarin as well.
Oh.
One of our previous shows, you actually mentioned two guests, Scott Hanselman and Jessica Kerr. Scott Hanselman didn't talk about this, but Jessica Kerr did talk about functional programming while in the show, so that was pretty phenomenal right there. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's some great use cases. We've talked to some customers who are doing things like telemetry data recording, and they can just write less code. Functional programming style allows them to do a lot more with a lot less code. So while C# is a great language, it is a little bit verbose in some cases, and so there's some great use cases out there.
Right, and let's make note that that Xamarin is a big deal. They have a community over 736,917 developers counting developers in the community, and it's essentially creating native iOS, Android, Mac, the emphasis there, and Windows apps. So you're really changing people's approach to creating applications. Something I wanted to hit on real quick and go back to is you said the millions of .NET developers. It's so interesting to me that Microsoft didn't hop on the mobile ban or kind of the mobile area, because it just, like you said, it kind of fell off for the longest time. But a lot of Microsoft developers, a lot of C# .NET guys, ASP, whatever. They were good devs, and they're like, man, I wish there was a mobile solution, because it's just exponential curve all over the place. So we're seeing a lot more of them be able to transition their good writing habits, because if there's one thing that coders have done, it's figured out, or programmers, excuse me, have done, is figure out better, faster, efficient, and effective ways of writing code. And there's a lot of really good knowledge there, and it would have been a shame to lose that, a lot of that. Now I think that this kind of speaks to more business applications being mobile ready. I'm sure that you see that a lot of people who were used to desktop writing, and now they can kind of write to the desktop and write to a mobile device. So that really helps using native C# ways and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, those developers have made massive investments in learning C# as a programming language, learning the .NET stack. And it's best practices around how to componentize your code for reuse, and all of that carries over. You mentioned their enterprise development. We have a number of great customers both in the enterprise space as well as in the consumer space. There's really no kind of application that's not an appropriate use case for Xamarin. As you noted, it's a fully native application. You do have 100% access to the native APIs. Our engineers are literally toiling away right now on our final baked release of iOS 8 support that we'll have coming out in literally a matter of hours. And so it brings, like you said, all those best practices in componentization out to just a whole new series of channels. Those developers aren't locked to desktop and web anymore. They can target all those fun new mobile environments and platforms as well.
Yeah, that is awesome. Now, a quick question: How does Xamarin handle the component communication barriers between C# and actual, where there's no getting around it? You have to do some native coding.
So there's with Xamarin, one thing to clarify is that you never have to write Objective-C or Java or anything like that to access the native APIs. That's our secret sauce. We actually give you the C# bindings to those APIs. So you're still developing, against the native UI kits. You're developing against the native APIs, and that's an extremely powerful paradigm, because that means that when you run into, and I say when, not if, when you run into that
I like that.
It comes up all the time.
And I'm sitting here like, you're serious, really? Yep.
When you run into that fringe use case where you need access to that very low-level Bluetooth API or that very low-level NFC API, you're going to have access to that. So it's incredibly important to know that that's going to be at your disposal. And so, being able to build using the native UI kits, it means you can create all the great user experiences that end users have expected in their applications, smooth animations and transitions, and you're using things like UI table views in an iOS application, list views and fragments and layouts, and all your alternate pixel-independent layouts for each one of the individual platforms. So, really, you're going to have that full suite of capabilities still at your disposal.
And before we get into the demo section of the show, where do you see Xamarin's future going with further integration, just overall? I mean, do you see more adoption from those who have maybe not wanted to get into other platforms and stuff like that? Do you see there being a bigger push for that?
Well, I think what we're seeing is that mobility is now just becoming just the norm. If you go back 10 years, there was a time when anything that was web development was outsourced. It went all out to agencies, and over the last 10 years, it's just become part of the delivery channels that organizations specialize in. There's desktop, there's server-side technologies, there's web, and what we see happening already, the trend is already starting, is organizations are looking at how are we going to deliver a mobile strategy.
How are we going to bring that back in-house? How we're going to bring that back in-house instead of, okay, perfect.
Yeah, exactly. They've outsourced this. They've gotten various projects done. There's a lot of agencies that have been involved, and they'll continue to be involved. But we're seeing an increase in the interest in bringing that back in-house and making it just part of the way that they deliver software to their end users, whether it's a consumer customer or whether it's a B2B or B2E type scenario. Just all of those cases, mobility is just going to become part of software development. It won't be mobility anymore. It will just be software development.
Yeah, exactly. You said it perfect. Now let's go ahead and jump into the demo side because we're right on that 25 mark. So we're ready to go whenever you are.
Absolutely. So we'll go ahead and let me cut over. I'll share my entire screen here. Just if I can, let me make sure. Maybe I didn't click the right box here. Hold on one second. We'll do share. We'll do entire screen. We'll go ahead and share. And if you can just confirm for me that you can see my entire screen shared.
Yeah, we see Visual Studio open.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So we're going to take a look at a couple of different things within Xamarin's technology. We're going to take a look at a bit of the integration in with Visual Studio, which is obviously a key part of Xamarin's value proposition. You know, keeping those C# developers in the environment that they're used to, that they're comfortable, that they're super productive in. They've got their ALM integrated into here, their source code check-in, their continuous builds, their work item tracking, and all their various tools that make them productive developers, things like ReSharper. And so we want to make sure that we're not forcing them outside of that experience and giving them the best part. Then after that, we're going to take a quick look at our Xamarin Studio experience, which we were talking about a little bit before the session as well. And there's just some great use cases for why it might make sense to stay in Visual Studio, why it might make sense to look at Xamarin Studio. But we'll kind of take a look at some of the pros and cons of both of those things, and just see some of the best practices and where really truly those benefits are of doing your application development with Xamarin. And the first thing looking at Visual Studio is that the integration is seamless, and as far as a .NET developer is concerned, they're not developing for anything other than what they've already done. What we do is we add in an extension into Visual Studio that allows us to connect directly into the Android debug bridge. So that gives us integration in with basically any device that can register itself. We actually just use the Android SDK, so there's no magic, no voodoo or anything like there, or maybe there is behind the scenes and I don't know. But it integrates directly in with that debug bridge. So you plug in your device, make it a developer device, authorize it, you're good to go. And that's the same both on iOS and Android. On iOS, and you'll see in my setup here that I'm running a Windows virtual machine on top of my Mac build host. So for iOS, you do need to have a Mac build host, and the reason for that is that we're very deeply integrated in with the Xcode development tool chain. So we're using the native iOS SDKs, the native simulators and functionality and code signing, and that allows us to create that fully native, fully compiled application that's on par with what you're going to get out of an Objective-C based application. So by integrating in with that Mac build environment, we're able to just piggyback off of what Apple is already doing extremely well, and just kind of feed our precompiled C# code into that tool chain. And again, that means that your users' applications are not going to be there's not going to be any performance issues. There's not going to be any distribution issues. There's no questions about that in the App Store, which always comes up. What happens if the developer needs to, or if the App Store changes their terms? Xamarin apps are exactly the same as an Objective-C based application. So when I come into Visual Studio and I start up a new project, I'm going to see a few different templates in here. And you guys are actually getting a little bit of a sneak peek. Anybody who hasn't installed the developer preview is going to see some of the features that are from our brand new spanking release. It's available in developer preview as well as in our beta channel, and shows our iOS 8 integration as well. So this has been available to developers since July. So Apple announced iOS 8. our engineers get hard at work, and just fundamentally with the way that our binding approach works to the APIs, it's very quick and easy for us to get new releases out to customers. So again, really important. Customers are going to get all of those, all that native functionality at the exact same time as their Objective-C and Java counterparts are, and there's not going to be any sacrifices as well. So a few things that, to take a look in here. So we have kind of our classic API applications, and so one of the things that's new with our new release that's coming out is that we're adding 64-bit support. Some of the new functionality, like the app extensions framework, is 100% 64-bit, and so we've had to add some support in there. So our engineers, I don't think we let them sleep for the last 3 months, but they've finally got everything all working properly, and we'll be able to deliver that great experience same day. But our classic API, or in that process of updating to that new unified API with the 64-bit, we took it as an opportunity to clean up some things. We had to add some new data types that were 64-bit friendly and some things like that. But we didn't want to make a difficult transition for our existing developers. So we have this this notion of a classic API that developers can maintain their development on as long as they want to until they're ready to actually transition. Inside the IDE, you're going to see that we have full support for iPad, for iPhone, and for universal style applications. And then we have various templates in here for different kinds of applications that you might want to build. So, we'll set up a storyboard inside your iOS application that's a master detail type application. Again, samples for the scene kit type applications, OpenGL, bringing in a single view applications, and just various other tablets. An important one to note down here that we always talk about native application development, and what we generally hear from customers is that that's where they want to be. They've tried different kinds of hybrid apps, and it's a good use case for certain scenarios. Mostly they want to be on that that native stack, but know that with Xamarin, it's not mutually exclusive, and there's some great features built into Xamarin to use things like the ASP.NET Razor templating engine inside your hybrid views in an application. So you can do hybrid applications with Xamarin as well, and you're still coding in C# across all the platforms. So there's some nice benefits to there. And just know that you're not having to leave behind anything. You're still going to get that great multi-delivery approach. If you come up and look, we've also added in the Android templates, and those include things like same kinds of styles of applications. We've got our WebView application in here. And one library that's important to point out, and I skimmed over it on the iOS side, these are called our bindings libraries. And this is, again, a key part and a key differentiator of Xamarin as opposed to some of the other platforms. And that's that we allow you to easily bring in your existing libraries, be that Java archives or frameworks and archives on the Objective-C side, and actually create a C# binding to that so you can use that libraries. So we have a great component store, components.xamarin.com. These are all libraries, or a lot of them are libraries that have been bound and just wrapped up. Their iOS or Android SDKs that the developers created a C# wrapper around, so you can bring those right into your application with just a couple of clicks. So know that that's out there as well. You can re-leverage your existing components. And then the third section here that I want to call out is this new mobile app section. And for those who are a little bit familiar with Xamarin, we had a pretty major announcement earlier this year. It was our Xamarin 3 announcement, and there was a number of new features that we added. But one of the ones that's been a really big splash is our new Xamarin Forms library. And so for a lot of folks, their main complaint about Xamarin, and we don't view it that way. We view it as flexibility to build the kind of application you need, is that they don't have cross-platform UI. So developers want to build applications and literally write the UI once, still get that same native experience. So what we did is, once we felt like we got the recipe right with the underlying framework and we were doing all the foundational things correctly, we added in the Xamarin Forms framework, which now gives you XAML-based UI layouts that are, or can be, 100% cross-platform. And the really nice thing is that while Xamarin focuses specifically on iOS and Android app development, that UI carries over into the Windows Phone world as well. So if you're writing an application that maybe you're targeting iOS or you're targeting Android first, you can build out the entire application, and you're going to get, with very few changes, maybe 80 to 90% of your application built for the other platforms. So that's really unique about the way Xamarin does that as well. And we also don't lock you out from the underlying tooling. So if the forms types controls that we give you, a button or some kind of a layout, don't exactly match what you need, you can create what's called a custom renderer and actually tap into the native controls. Again, you're still using C# across the board, but you're able to still use the native UI one of the platforms. A couple things.
Hey, David, can I ask you a quick question?
This particular solution is. Yeah, absolutely.
So, if you already
go
have
ahead.
a project, if you created a Windows Phone project or a universal project for Windows Store and Windows Phone, can you kind of do the opposite? Can you add a Xamarin project to your solution and take advantage of this, or will you have to go one by one and add a Xamarin iOS, a Xamarin Android?
So in that case, so Xamarin Forms, well, we give you the controls and such are actually Xamarin Forms controls. So much like when you look at Silverlight versus WPF, well, syntactically it's very similar. The controls that you're actually that you're actually implementing with are a little bit different, and the same is true with Xamarin Forms. So we have a button, and it's basically an abstraction over the native button on each one of the platforms. When you look at a project that's using Xamarin Forms, you'll see that we have this Android and iOS and Windows Phone specific implementation files that when your application runs maps your metadata definitions or your layout that's described in XAML down to the actual native controls. So you're getting a UI button on iOS, a button widget in Android, and a button object in the Windows Phone side. So because of that, the XAML that you've written already for a Windows Phone application or a WinRT app or WPF, that doesn't directly translate over into Windows Forms. You would first have to, Xamarin Forms. You would have to translate that into the Xamarin Forms XAML. If you were to do that, then you would get those other platforms first. But you can't go directly from, say, Silverlight for Windows Phone and just get for free an iOS or an Android application. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, again, it reduces the learning curve just because you've got developers who already understand things like data templates and, putting bindings and view models and things like that. It's very natural for a developer who's coming from those backgrounds, but it doesn't directly translate over. And so, if we shift gears a little bit, this is one of our pre-built applications, and we have a handful of these pre-built apps as well as dozens and dozens of recipes and samples, kitchen sink style applications that just show you all different kinds of usage of UI controls along with tutorials. But after we developed those, we said, we need some really comprehensive applications that people can use as reference architectures for their particular use cases. And so we built some of these, and one of them that we're going to look at today is called our field service application. And the intention when we developed the field service app was it's a use case that really resonates well. Almost every organization has some type of field service scenario. You can swap out the button labels with something else that's more applicable to your line of business, but there's just so many applicable use cases for this. But what we wanted to do was show you how to build a great native user application for each one of the respective target platforms, but to get a maximum amount of code reuse and code sharing across the individual platforms. So the first thing that you see here in this particular project is that I have a DLL. Now this was actually built before some of the newer features were actually rolled out, and we've chosen not to update it because we do want it to be backward compatible. So this is using a DLL with file linking, but we do have full support for Microsoft's newer shared project libraries, which are basically smart file linking. They're amazing. They're absolutely fantastic. And also portable class libraries. So if you're developing 100% code that's just independent of user interface logic, you're calling web services or local reading and writing of SQLite databases and things like that, you can use things like portable class libraries to share your code. So for this example, like I said, we're just using file linking, which was at the time the right way to do this, but there's some newer methods that would be a better approach possibly. But taking a look first and foremost is just looking at some of these C# objects in here, and these are just plain old C# objects. There's nothing special about these objects. We put a couple of attributes on the objects so that when we're writing into our SQLite database, which we're using a third-party cross-platform library called SQLite.net, it's an OR mapping SQLite library. But we're not doing anything special with these libraries. We're just writing plain old C# objects. And these are objects that are going to be the foundation. Maybe you're starting in iOS and then going over to Android and over to Windows Phone, and you're just going to get all of that for free. You're not going to have to write those read-write actions into your database over again. Or if this was integrated in with a web service, you're not going to have to call out to that web service multiple times and figure out multiple ways to serialize and deserialize that JSON data that's coming back and parsing it. All of that's just done in one fell swoop with a Xamarin-based application. So you see that we've represented things like expenses and photos and all different kinds of things. We're using a lot of the functionality from the .NET runtime, so our generic collections and link and things like that, again, that advanced C# developers have been using for years in their other applications. So just bringing in all of that same kind of functionality. But then we have specific applications for each one of the platforms, and there's a really important reason why we do this. Other cross-platform vendors, they'll hide from you the fact that that application exists, and we just believe that that's fundamentally the wrong approach. There's so many nuances of each one of the target platforms that you need to be able to have access to, that we just bring that right up to the front. We want you to know about those things. And that's things like your resources folder. So let's take an Android project, for example, here, and looking at your resources folder, you have all of your drawable folders, and so you have your drawable for HDPI, MDPI, XHDPI, and the same thing for layouts for landscape and portrait layouts, for 720dp, 720dp landscape and portrait. We have all of that functionality built in, and again, that's because we're just doing exactly what Google has done. So all of that just translates over directly into a Xamarin-based project, and that means that you as a developer can just continue doing all of the best practices that that Google has built into the Android operating system. Additionally, we've got things like activities. So if we come in here and take a look at an activity, this particular activity is actually just inheriting from this this base activity object, which if we dig into that, and again, just showing here the same functionality that the .NET developer would expect. We've got the ability, you see here, we're just accessing an Android activity object. These are all coming from our Android namespaces, which is our bindings to the native APIs. If I come in here and I just start typing my using and I go to my Android namespace, you'll see all of the APIs that a developer might expect to access. So all of your graphic APIs, your media APIs, location services, we see NFC, OpenGL, all of your operating system calls and so on. You've got direct access all in C# code. And for anybody who's ever tried, it's very easy to actually even take existing Java samples and bring those right into your application as well. So it's just a huge wealth of resources that make it easy because we're not artificially adding any layers in there. You're just doing it exactly the same way. If I take a look at one of those individual layout files, we've got great support built in for the layout editors, so we can open that up directly inside Visual Studio. We've got some nice add-ins over here on the left-hand side that show you all of the alternate layouts for this particular layout. So we'll go to each one of those folders that are specific to a given platform, and we'll go ahead and we'll find that file name. So we have that assignment layout.axml, and we'll bring that into the GUI editor. I can change and see what's this going to look like if I change to a different form factor device. I can change to different versions of Android, and we'll emulate that, show that functionality. And I can even come in and I can change custom themes and see how that makes my application look. I've also got all my drag and drop functionality. So we've got a toolbox. So again, that toolbox metaphor is maintained from the .NET world. Drag and drop those controls right into my UI. And then most importantly, when I come in and I look at the source code behind this, it's just Android layout XML. So again, we're not doing anything wild here. It's exactly the same as the XML that you're using inside your Android application. So super cool. You can just copy paste samples from existing Android applications.
I hate to jump in, but man, that is totally awesome. That is great.
Yeah, well, the first time I saw that, I installed it. I opened up Visual Studio and just went, oh my God. I'm actually using. I'm doing exactly what I wanted. I had gone to Google and just gone, all right, iOS, Android development, C#. There's got to be something better out there than what I'm doing, and that's when Xamarin popped up, and I installed it and just went, this is exactly what I'm looking for. I want to build native apps, but I want to do it with C# instead. And so if you think that's cool, let me show you this particular feature right here, which is we're now jumping into our iOS application. And so I've got a storyboard here. And so storyboards are the UI development markup. Again, this is all XML driven, but the storyboard is the way that you develop user interface, and you define your entire interface in one file in an iOS application. So what it's going to do is it's going to have your individual views as well as things like transitions in between the views. And this is a little bit of a large exact iOS definition of a user interface represented directly inside Visual Studio. So you can do all of the functionality that you would do in Xcode to design your user interface and design all those segues and transitions and layouts and custom UIs and things like that from directly within Visual Studio. So that was one of the new things that we announced in May of this year as well with our Xamarin 3.0 release.
I'm going to say this for Alejandro, sold. That's all I got.
I was going to say, I am sold.
There we go. It's, yeah, I mean, this was one of those fantastic things. I remember when I started with Xamarin, I was walking through one of the offices one day. I was actually, I think, in the Boston office, and I was walking through, and I looked over someone's shoulder, and I said, what is that? And they said, oh, that's our new iOS designer. I said, we're building an iOS designer? And they just said, yes, we are. And it was just, it was like, at that point I was sold. I had left my job. I had started a new job, so I was in it to win it anyways. But I saw that, and that was immediately me saying, I know that I'm at the right place. This is the right place to the right way to go about doing this. So likewise, you get your same great toolbox over here, your drag and drop controls, gesture recognizers, all that fantastic functionality. So again, same developer experience that you would expect to get from an iOS application. And then lastly, you would expect to have this, and you do. If I come into my WinRT version of my application, I'm going to get those same great design experiences. Each one of these applications, we brought in that data model, so you can actually see your shared common data. So all of our common objects that we're coding against, things like our utility methods of doing any kind of dependency injection in IOC containers, and all of our view models to do that two-way MVVM style programming. So it is possible, even with the traditional UI layouts, to do an MVVM style language. And so let's go ahead and see what that application looks like. So why is it important to have that kind of separation of presentation in your application? So here what we're looking at is it's an iPad simulator on my desktop. Let me just rotate this really quickly. This is an iPad simulator that's running on my Mac workstation. So I could plug in a physical device if I wanted to as well, but hitting F5 in Visual Studio simply spun up that new emulator, and I can jump right into my environment. And as I'm going through my application, I get a fantastic iOS 7 specific user experience, or iOS 8. iOS in general, I get an experience that looks and feels and belongs on this given platform. So I get the great accelerated scrolling capabilities. I can drill into the applications. I get beautiful, smooth transitions that have all been defined in my storyboard layout. I get my mapping functionality in here. I can zoom in and zoom out of my particular controls and twist and zoom my maps. And this is just using the same base functionality. And on top of that, we're layering in all the great things that .NET gives you. So if I come in here and I want to start tracking time, I'll change this to an active task, and then I can come in here, I can start tracking time on my timer. This is using all kinds of asynchronous programming models that carry over across the different platforms. So writing really immersive and responsive user experiences is very, very easy to do with Xamarin. So that's the iOS version of the application. As you can see, you get that beautiful, native, fast-performing user experience that you'd expect. But let's see that same thing in an Android and a WinRT version. So I've gone ahead and I've connected my Android emulator. Little pro tip here if you're using emulators for your Android development. We always say use devices as much as you can, but if you're using emulators, you use something like just an option. So let's see, we're just building, and what will happen, this takes a little bit longer to push over your first time, because what we're actually doing, it run at release time, highly optimized package that information inside your developer don't have to go and install a clunky third-party runtime through the App Store. The first time your app runs, it says, oh, hey, go install this runtime. We don't have to do those kinds of things. See, your application starts up, same user experience, same login, but everything looks and feels like it belongs on an Android application. So again, we can drill into that Android application. We can change the status. We get user animations and an experience that belongs and start gamers, and all of this functionality, all this code is common across the platforms. So great user experience, and it looks and feels and belongs like it's on that platform because it does. And then last but not least, obviously, this is one of the new platforms that we're seeing a lot of adoption, particularly in the enterprise space, is the new WinRT platform. And so we go ahead and we run this application, and now you're going to get also that fully immersive WinRT style, the modern style user interface that's really starting to gain some traction now. So we'll see the application. Did I hit debug? I didn't, apparently. But we see our application comes up immediately. I've got that same user experience, and I've got that modern style UI. All the same information. This is actually being fed from the same SQLite database across all three of the platforms. We have some other great example applications that are using things like Azure Mobile Services. So we were one of the first Azure Mobile Services partners. Actually, I think we were the first Azure Mobile Services partner. And so you can use all things like offline data store and data sync and functionality like that. But just, again, that great experience, the tiled UI that looks and feels and belongs on each one of these platforms. And you've been able to create and finally craft that experience to belong on this particular target audience. And so you don't need to actually do that for each one of the platforms. So that's just a really quick overview of that kind of developer experience. We are running a little bit low on time, so we've got some other great demos all over our sites that show doing cross-platform UI development with our Xamarin Forms container or Xamarin Forms framework. Lots of great samples there. I'd encourage you guys to check those out as well, and really see how you can, for certain use cases, reach as high as 100% code reuse and still get a great native application as well. So with that, I think we'll wrap up from this part of the demo and maybe cut back in. So I'll go ahead and I'll stop the screen sharing here.
So a couple of things. First, you're an amazing presenter, and I hope they're paying you some good money because you're worth it. That was a solid.
Tell my boss that.
Yeah, you tell your boss that I said so. Secondly, I'm sold. This thing is gorgeous. I loved seeing you run it on all those different things. And yeah, it was kind of a it was one of those demo things, but it was wonderful. I mean, it was just gorgeous. It really was. It was phenomenal. And I saw Alejandro taking notes during this thing, man. And when that dude starts taking down some notes, you know that it's happening. It's going down.
You bet.
But I think this is just, I mean, if you're a bigger or even smaller, whatever the case is, if you're not using this, you're missing out, because you're like David said, you're missing out on being more efficient, and we all know efficiency saves money, and if you're saving money, it means you can expend more for products and things of that nature, and have more time with your family, and instead of working crazy hours like what we do. So that's awesome. It's just phenomenal. Alejandro, what do you have to say about after watching that presentation?
Well, I kind of want to add a note for the viewers in case they are brand new to Xamarin, they never heard of it. There is actually another tool, Xamarin Studio, which is a standalone solution that is offered also. If you don't have Visual Studio, you can download Xamarin Studio, which is a full-blown IDE, and it also runs on your Mac, or it runs on Windows, right?
Yeah, correct. It works both on Mac and Windows. The only caveat on the Windows side is it doesn't have iOS capabilities built in. So if you're doing iOS from Windows, you do need to use Visual Studio for that. But yes, it's a fantastic user experience. on the iOS side, or excuse me, on the Mac side, brings the best of both worlds. JJ was talking about that before the session. It looks and feels like Xcode, but brings in your solution structure. And actually, to expand on what Alejandro said, you can actually mix and match. You don't have to use one or the other. The same solution structure opens in both of the IDEs. So one developer can use the Xamarin Studio IDE, check into source control. Another developer can pull it out and use that inside Visual Studio. That's a seamless experience. So we've really tried to bring in all the best that Visual Studio has to offer. Obviously, Visual Studio is it sets a bar of itself. So there's always some things there that we would love to have. But for me as a developer, the really interesting thing was my first thought when getting started with Xamarin was, great, I don't have to leave Visual Studio. I can stay in this amazing IDE that I've been using for so long. But as time wore on and I continued to use the Xamarin Studio interface, I just found myself incredibly productive in it. So we love working in both. I think both have their time and place, but yeah, you can work 100% in a Mac environment, no Windows involved, if you prefer, and do all of your development that way as well.
Awesome. So we've heard it, we've seen it, all the above. Tell us what do you do away from the keyboard, David? What's one of your passions?
Man. There's not a lot of time away from the keyboard nowadays, but
sure.
One of the really nice things about being here at Xamarin is I'm surrounded by a lot of people who very much into to getting outside. That's one of the great things about being in the Bay Area. That's where I'm located now. So I try to get on my bike, ride around, get up into Marin County and some things like that. And then otherwise just enjoy life. I've got a 2-year-old daughter who's just an amazing little girl. She teaches me new things every day, mostly patience. Patience.
Yeah.
But just spending quality time with my family and getting out and just seeing the beautiful sights that Northern California has to offer.
Oh, nice.
That's
well
nice.
Put. Yeah. So before the show I told you about a question. Did you settle on one of those questions? What do you see as the next technological niche? Technology change in 3 to 5 years. Any one of those ring a bell?
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about, you talk about the trends that we're going to see changing, and it's interesting because over the next year or so, what trend do we think? And I think a lot of people would say that wearables is going to be that trend, and I don't disagree. I think wearables is going to become an incredibly popular thing, but what I actually think I see changing is that mobility in general is just going to become even more mainstream than it is today.
Right.
Everybody has these mobile devices, and they've become this, an extension of us. They're no longer these computers, but literally they're part of us.
Right.
And I just continue to see that taking over in new and innovative ways. And that's the super fun thing about what I get to do every day is I talk to customers and they tell me what they're building with their apps. It's like, that is amazingly simple and profound, and I can't believe nobody thought of that, and you're going to be a millionaire. Congratulations, because what people are coming up with in new and innovative ways to use these mobile devices, I think that we're just going to see that trend continue, and obviously wearables are just going to be part of that mobile computing trend.
I couldn't agree with you more. And where people can find more about what you're doing so they can follow you if they enjoyed listening to you talk, I know I did, they can follow you on Twitter at DW Hathaway, that's HATHAWAY, and you can check out more about what Xamarin does, XAMARIN.com. So go check that out. We have some announcements we'd like to throw out there, and also some charities we'd like you to know about. We have upcoming shows, Track.js. Also, Gus is out in Las Vegas, I believe, during the Dev Connections. For us here at STL Tech Talk, we're covering Strange Loop Conference as downtown St. Louis, Startup Voodoo, which is next week, next Thursday. Also, St. Louis Days of .NET. I don't know if, David, you're going to be able to get there or whatever the case is, but if you are, we'd love to see you because we're doing some pre-compiler stuff and we're doing full coverage of the event, and it's an awesome event. There's usually about 4,000 people that show up, so it's a pretty big deal for St. Louis, and it's a big .NET community, so I'm sure Xamarin or the like is going to be there in some form of fashion. And then, David, tell us what's coming around the corner in about 19 days.
So yeah, we actually have our second ever developer conference, Evolve 2014. It's going to be in Atlanta, Georgia. It's a 5-day event. Starts on October 6th and goes through October 10th. First 2 days are going to be all kinds of technical training. So for new and old developers alike, people who have either spent time with the platform and just want to get that much better with it, or people who have really never had the opportunity. Great opportunity to just get trained up on that. And then also 3 days of conference sessions. There's going to be great tracks on game development, on enterprise development, best of iOS and Android. We've got great speakers like John Skeet from Google is going to be there presenting as well, and then different kinds of sponsors from all different walks of life. So whatever the kind of mobile application you're building, is going to be something there for you. So definitely check that out. You can check that out at evolve.xamarin.com. That'll list all the events and sessions and timelines and all the good details that you need to know.
Fantastic. So charities I want you all to know about: Hope Line, a domestic violence prevention and support organization; the Women's Safe House; Safe Connections; the Schumann Water Initiative, where it provides water to emerging countries, clean water so they can actually eat, drink, and all that, which is important. Hope for Young Adults with Cancer. That is, and all these will be in our show notes, so you can go there and click on those and donate, or find a charity of your own and donate to a cause that's greater than yourself. Hey, look, that was somebody from above coming down to tell me a very important thing. So David, that is, holy cow, it's popping up all over the place. So David, thank you so much for being on the show. Alejandro, any final thoughts before we end tonight's show?
No, I'm just in awe. I think
that storyboarding gotcha. I know it did. When
Oh
you
my
said
God,
it,
yeah.
you're like, "Nope, I'm done. I'm done. I'm sold."
Yep, exactly. I'm like, I'm sorry, I need to go and download that right now.
Right. If you hear me, it's because loading in the background. What's going on? David, thank you again for taking out the time. We really appreciate it from the bottom of our hearts. Really appreciate it. I know Gus did a solid by getting you on, and now that he's not here, I know that he definitely is going to be sad that he missed the show. But man, you did a wonderful, solid job. So thank you so much for being on the show tonight.
JJ, thank you so much for having us here. Alejandro, it was a pleasure to talk with you as well. These things are super fun. It's what we love to do. We love talking about it. We love building the application. So we appreciate the opportunity to be here.
And a door's always open if you want to come back and talk to us some more. Also, to all of our fans, we love and thank you for the support of our show. This show is taking off in a way that we never thought was possible, so we appreciate all the feedback and all the downloads and all the views and hits and everything. So thank you so much. So from the entire STL Tech Talk crew, good coding, we're out.